Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Riverman.
Dean, when was the last time you had to spend an appreciable amount of time in a hospital? Maybe an overnight stay?
No.
Like the time?
No.
Has it been a while?
Well, like a birth of a child 11 years ago?
That was the last time? Really? You haven't had any reason since?
No, not really.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I really actually haven't either. You know, again, the birth of my son was the last time I spent an overnight in a hospital. And the only other time before that is I had food poisoning once.
Ooh, that's not good.
And I had to spend a couple days in the hospital.
A couple days?
Yeah, it wasn't the most. I probably didn't have to, but it was one of those things where they just kept me for a couple of days.
Life was good.
Yeah,
you know, they're bringing you food.
Yeah.
You had a view out the window.
I had no desire to go anywhere else for a little while there, so what did I care?
Understood. Yeah.
Well, okay, so then let's talk about the experience of being in a hospital, because
Yes.
I don't know too many people. I mean, obviously, if you have to go to the hospital, it's probably not for a good reason anyway.
Correct.
And the experience probably isn't pleasant for that reason, but I feel like a lot of people just don't have great experience in the hospital.
This is true.
In general.
This is true. Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot that can evolve around that. And healthcare is, they're taxed more than ever. Obviously, you know, the last few years have really put a burden on the healthcare system.
For sure.
But so that's why I think it's more important than ever that providers start embracing new technology and new methodologies to improve like satisfaction scores and make
outcomes.
The outcomes.
Can we say business outcomes when we're talking about people?
Well, I mean, it's let's be honest, it is a business. As much as we might not like it to be, it is a business.
That's
they have ends to meet. Yeah. So we're talking today about analytics in healthcare in particular as being one outlet to help healthcare systems, especially hospitals, really kind of, drive the business side of things while also making sure that they're providing the best care possible for all of their patients. Yeah. We've got Tim Kuebelbeck with us today from Ambient. He's going to help us talk a little bit more about
company.
This. Yep. Exactly. They're on the forefront of clinical analytics. We're going to dive into the current state of healthcare, where things are right now, what he's seeing out there, what's happening, what's coming. We're going to talk about analytics, data collection, how that's become a hot topic, what healthcare organizations should be focused on, what they should be using that for. We're going to get into some of the specific areas where it can be helpful and help hospitals make better decisions.
Nice.
And also what they should be looking for when it comes to figuring out, what kind of support software and partners they want to have.
There you go.
And then finally, we'll wrap up, let him tell us a little bit more about Ambient, what they do, how they help, how they can help our VARs out.
VARs, yes. So, how can they get? Yep.
Nice wide-ranging conversation about all things healthcare. I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yep, we're good to go.
All right, so all that plus our usual value to the VAR and what's TEConnecting with us, it's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, our guest today, as I mentioned, is Tim Kuebelbeck. He is the Chief Customer Officer for Ambient Clinical Analytics. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your day-to-day work, and how you got to be where you are.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Very happy to be here. Like you said, my name's Tim Kuebelbeck. I'm with Ambient Clinical Analytics. I've been in healthcare a long, long time, literally since the late 80s. Some would call me a dinosaur, but I've been around through multiple transitions, including the Y2K transition, which was a very interesting time. And it's moving into this era, it's kind of the post-pandemic era, right? And whereas previously it was the post-Y2K era, so it's a very interesting time to be in healthcare. As far as what I do every day at Ambient, I run the sales, marketing, and client satisfaction teams at Ambient Clinical Analytics. So, any of our customers' happiness, any new sales or existing sales, and then marketing all rolls up underneath the Chief Customer Officer.
He's got nothing to do all day. You just handle all the customers for Ambient.
And make sure they're all happy. I'm sure that's just
you're good.
That's a light lift,
Yeah, it's a light lift.
Nothing too much work there. Just making sure everyone's happy.
We need to speed things up a little bit so he can get back to his normal day job.
No doubt. I'm sorry. That's not a job I don't think I want. It's your job to make sure everyone that buys from us is happy.
And that you're marketing it right.
No pressure. Yeah.
No pressure.
All right. Well, hey, let's talk about the current state of healthcare because, as you mentioned, we're in kind of a different phase than where we were a few years ago, and a lot's happened. After the worst of the pandemic is hopefully behind us.
Yep.
We're coming out of that, but there's still a lot of things going on in healthcare, a lot of decisions to make, a lot of new practices to adopt and move forward with. So, tell us right now what's working and what isn't in healthcare.
Yeah, coming out of the pandemic, I think one thing that's really proven to work well is telehealth in the ambulatory market or the ambulatory care field, if you will. I think the pandemic proved that that's a very viable method of clinical care delivery, and I think it's permanently cemented in our care delivery system now. So we'll see that moving forward. I think from here till the end of time. It may drop a little bit. I know during the pandemic, there was a lot of people doing telehealth visits, and I think that number has gone down and will probably continue to go down too. But it without a doubt is working well and will remain a staple on the ambulatory care side, at least. I think what's not working well post-pandemic is really three things, and of those three things, they're pretty much all tied together, and they're major issues, if you ask me. One is cost. If you think of the locum tenens and traveling nursing costs, those costs have severely restricted healthcare systems from moving forward with clinical decision support tools and digital health. Just the other day, I was talking to a nurse at a major system on the East Coast, and she said, we want to do this, but we have to wait till we get a couple more good quarters. The traveling nursing costs are killing us. So we're seeing that have a major effect on hospitals and health systems rolling these solutions forward that are going to help with the physician and nurse burnout and things of that nature. And that's the next one, right? The burnout. I think we've always known there was smoke there and that physicians and nurses were struggling with their care of patients. But the pandemic, I think, really exposed that, made it more of a raw nerve, if you will, and showed that doctors and nurses are under extreme stress and extreme mental tough conditions when it comes to caring for patients. And to me, that's really an indicator that clinical decision support tools can really help in that area from an efficiency perspective and from helping automate some of the things that they shouldn't have to be concerned about. And then the last, I think, is the Great Resignation. That's really hurt hospitals. I think it's hurt a number of industries, especially the service market around food and restaurants, right? But in healthcare, the after effect is even greater. There's plenty of studies out there that prove as the nurse to patient or the physician to patient ratios go up, which they have tremendously over the last 2 years, that mortality increases, outcomes decrease. A lot of the things that healthcare is really, really worried about start to suffer. So, if we can do something along the lines of clinical decision support to alleviate that, I think that would go a long way in helping solve those three problems for healthcare.
Healthcare is not immune, right, to what we're
Nope.
finding in the labor force.
Nope.
When you think about it, and thanks for kind of quantifying in that way, Tim, it's like we always talk about warehouse workers and restaurant workers who are hard to find, but the burnout and what's happening in healthcare, very real, real issue. And it's interesting to tie it back to what is working, kind of where you were the telehealth, because that can kind of replace some of that labor, a little bit of it, or at least you can jumpstart some of that through a telehealth and stuff like that. But if you look at, some of the trends that are happening and where the IT spend is going, and telehealth seems to be definitely one of those ones that's up on the radar. Demand for wearable tech is another one of those things, these remote monitoring types of things that are collecting data. While they're just sitting there collecting data and stuff like that. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how the labor trends. Healthcare still has to get done. So are we going to continue to use technology? And what are you seeing, Tim? I'm maybe throwing you a little bit of a curveball here, but do you agree with that? That there is implementation of now technology to kind of offset where some of these labor woes are happening and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and back to your telehealth example that I brought up earlier too, right? So that's been used in the ambulatory field. It's been used fairly successfully in the intensive care units as well, right? So you think of a tele ICU command center. There are now companies and solutions that are focusing on taking that concept of technology and driving it across the entire acute care delivery platform. So into general acute care beds, into step down beds, into ED beds, not just for the ICU or intensivists anymore. It's also for hospitalists. And then I think the step after that is to drive that into skilled nursing facilities and hospitals at home. You mentioned the wearables with the wearable device. I mean, Apple's got what, 3 FDA approved devices already, maybe 4. You're just going to see that grow and grow and grow. And with those kind of devices, it makes it very reasonable to monitor those patients remotely. And after all, they can heal a lot better at home than they would in a hospital.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I think that's starting to happen in the digital health industry is this digital clinical analytics platform that's driving rules and driving detection and an understanding of what's occurring within the patient and giving that understanding to the physicians and nurses. So I think, to your point, that's exactly where the market is starting to go.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this is such a good conversation, because I think, a lot of our resellers understand data, right? I mean, they understand the acquisition of data and things of that nature. But when you think about it, healthcare, everything that we just described, from wearables to other ways of transforming the healthcare industry, is data intensive. It's adding more data to the entire process. And so, I was reading articles that the volume of data that is now, it was happening pre-COVID, but now that you have everything that Tim has described with the labor issues and stuff like that, the volume is intensifying, and it's creating such things. And I guess we'll get into it a little bit, but things like data lakes, right? Now you have these lakes of data that it's incumbent upon companies like Ambient to figure out ways of parsing from that data meaningful information that the care physicians or the caretakers can utilize in order to facilitate better care at the end of the road.
And that's the perfect segue kind of in our next question here, which is, again, what do you do with all this? We know analytics, we know data and data collection, all that stuff it's a big hot button issues. Everyone understands they need to collect it. And to your point, there's plenty of stuff out there that is doing it already. There are plenty of devices that are collecting data and collecting information. But what do we do with that? And what should healthcare organizations be focused on? So help us out there, Tim, to, if you were in healthcare right now, or if you're talking to someone in healthcare, which I'm sure you guys do all the time, obviously, but when they're asking, like, okay, so, you're talking to me about collecting all this analytics and data, and I'm supposed to be gathering this information. What should I be doing with it? What should I be paying attention to? What should I be actually focused on? And what's just kind of noise that maybe I shouldn't? So where do you help them start that process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And when you think of clinical decision support and, data, really what I think of is the ability to drive clinical efficiency and clinical process. So if you think of clinical processes today, some of them are not so complex, some of them are extremely complex. And the extremely complex ones are extremely difficult for a physician or a nurse to monitor. And I think that's where these standalone softwares that are outside of the EHR are really having a major impact on the delivery of care. And I think that what we've seen over the course of the pandemic, as other companies are starting to develop these tools, is an incredible impact that they're going to have on healthcare over the coming years, right? That I don't think was visible 2 or 3 years ago. Just from our perspective, our roadmap has changed with the pandemic and rolled ever so slightly, now understanding all of that. And if you take sepsis, for example, right, there are FDA Class 2 cleared tools that accurately detect sepsis and then drive the appropriate bundle elements. The problem is using today's homemade EHR tools to try and drive that clinical analytics is, so you have a solution that detects sepsis, but then what? There's 7 components to the treatment bundle that are based on 5 different timers, and those timers kick off at different times based on the patient's clinical condition. Like, did they have too low blood pressures, right? On the second low blood pressure, then fluids becomes required. And so it's extremely hard for those types of processes to be tracked and for hospitals to deliver good care and be efficient at it. And with digital health, all of that can be codified into the solution that says, hey, this patient just had their second low blood pressure. Let's send a reminder to the physician that she needs to order fluids, and then to the nurse to say, hey, the physician ordered fluids, you need to hang the bag. So driving that kind of clinical process using the data and the analytics is very different than the data lake that you referred to earlier, Dean. I mean, that's population health. That was kind of the first step in these big giant data captures, and now we're seeing that move more into the real time and into digital health. I think something else that's important to understand is there are a lot of niche versus framework type solutions out there, right? So if you think of the issues that you're trying to solve, there's like, I know University of Chicago was trying to solve chronic heart failure issues and MI, myocardial infarction issues some time ago, and they bought a solution for just one of those issues. The reality is they may end up ripping that solution out and replacing it because they don't have a solution that is malleable to other clinical conditions. So as you're looking at these solutions, you definitely want to buy a platform and not a niche solution, because then you're just going to end up doing that work all over again, if that makes sense. So that's really an important piece. And I think that's really the digital health platform direction where that's going today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, getting back to the point that you've got this variety of information now coming in, pouring into healthcare, which is interesting to feel, think about that framed out that way. They're gathering data from all these sources, and how do you manipulate it? It's more than just the EHR, right? It's more than just the big system and the information that was stored in there. It's all these other data points that are coming in, and how to facilitate that. I think that's where the opportunities are. And as Tim was speaking at one of our or a part of one of our summits, it's kind of understanding that, right? It's getting to know that this is happening in the marketplace. There's this data influx, but there's a need obviously to manipulate the variety of data that's coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
I'm continuously fascinated by some of the data you can get and what you can do with it. The one that really stood out to me over the last few years is when you started hearing about the wastewater analysis. That was happening.
Yes,
like as a way to track, where there might be COVID spikes,
COVID trends,
and you hear more about that, and you're hearing more discussion about, hey, that can be a great way for us in the future to track any kind of pathogens or diseases as they're spreading and maybe get ahead of them. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like, man, there's no wrong way to take that kind of data in and find something useful to get out of it. That's the kind of stuff you'd want to be working on. But to Tim's point, I think anything that you can grab onto that's going to help you make the day-to-day processes and workflow move faster and smoother and more efficient, and is going to address all those issues and challenges we've already been talking about, there's no reason not to embrace those. And, we'll get to this more later on about, how as VARs, we can help partner up with companies like Ambient in order to go in and position ourselves with those kind of solutions, because that's the stuff I feel like most hospitals and healthcare organizations are really, really want and need. And they may not know what to ask for. They may not know what they actually will get them to where they want to be until you come in and help have that conversation, ask the right kinds of questions. Be like, hey, I see you guys are doing this. What is that actually helping you with right now? Like you mentioned the myocardial infarctions, okay, let's say you've got that platform doing this. How's that helping you? Great. Wouldn't you like something like that for sepsis or something like that for some other kind of treatments that you do? And if, asking those kind of questions to help expand that out a little bit and get them to that point where maybe a broader platform is actually going to help them. So,
but Tim, you're saying that being overly niche in the care is actually a detriment, right? Because it all kind of has to work within the platform, and the data needs to be shareable and things of that nature, right? So if you're just hyper niched on something, it's not to your use case that you used, you might have to rip and replace that because it's not connecting to other parts. So the quality of care, which is at the end of the road, the goal is too narrow in those cases.
Yeah, and it can drive good care around MI, for example, myocardial infarction, right? And detection and then driving that clinical process. But there are a host of clinical conditions that occur in hospitals for patients: strokes, surgical site infection, catheter-associated urinary tract infections, DVT, VTEs, embolisms. I mean, there is just it's a dozen or so that need to be monitored, if you will. And so having a platform that's malleable across those is extremely important, because sepsis might be the number one issue that they're facing today, but long term they're going to need to take it to a different level.
Yeah, makes
definitely.
sense.
Well, then let's dive a little further then here into picking the right platform and figuring out which direction to go here. When you realize, like, yeah, I need to have something that is more expansive and not so niche. So obviously treating, patients for things like sepsis, readmissions, preventing deaths, all this stuff can benefit from these smart clinical analytics. But help us understand what hospitals should be looking for and asking about when they're trying to find some decision support software. What kind of questions should they be asking? And therefore, what can we equip our VARs with so that when they're going out and partnering up with you and having these discussions, they know how to position their solution, your solution, against others that might say, well, we do the exact same thing, but we'll do it for much cheaper than that or something.
Yeah. Well, the good news is for us, they don't, right? But to answer that question, I really think it's a two-part answer when you're looking at these types of technologies. One, and probably is going to be a lot more important based on some recently released guidelines, is FDA compliance. There are a multitude of solutions out there that are doing what we do and doing what others like Ambient do, but have not bothered to go through the FDA Class 2 process. And I'll dig a little bit deeper on that. But then the second piece of that is technology, right? So what does the solution do? And going back to the malleable thing, is it malleable to other clinical conditions, I think is part of it. But back on the FDA guidelines, in the middle or end of September, the FDA clarified or re-released guidelines around clinical decision support. And in that, they specifically called out that clinical decision support tools that do detection of, suggestion of a particular clinical issue, or drive a clinical process for life-threatening conditions, and they use the phrase like sepsis, must be FDA cleared, is essentially what the new regulations say. And the scary part about that is that probably less than 1% of the hospitals in the US have deployed clinical decision support tools that are FDA Class 2 cleared when they really are required to be. And so if you think of, to your sepsis example, the sepsis problem, essentially in the US, roughly 50% of all patients that are septic get the appropriate treatment. Think about that for a second. Let's back that up and give a different example. If you were, to your earlier example, when's the last time you were in the hospital, Dean? You said for a birth, right? 11 years ago. If you knew that hospital was going to give your birth or handle that birth correctly 50% of the time, you'd probably choose a different hospital, because that's
no doubt about it, right? Yeah.
So, and that's what's occurring in sepsis across the U.S. is that those patients aren't getting, and the ramifications of that, the outcomes are horrendous. We're talking about amputations, long-term organ damage, readmits, 90-day, 60-day, 30-day mortality rates that are not good when you don't do that correctly. So that FDA clearance is extremely important and will help drive a lot of the clinical efficiencies we've been talking about so far. And I think that there will be some hospitals and health systems that choose to disregard that because they're either halfway through a deployment or they just finished a deployment. But there's a lot of risk in that, right? From mortality on. I know in Minneapolis, about 3-4 years ago, there was a major lawsuit around sepsis, and I think it ended up costing the health system something like $24 million, right? And even the most diligent nurses and physicians, they get fatigued. They make mistakes, and so having FDA compliant, approved solutions that have gone through peer review, that have gone through those studies, and have been proven to be effective for a certain type of application, they just make sense in the industry. And I think we're going to see a lot more of the hospitals very quickly start to adopt that kind of a technology, if you will. And then I think the last thing is really around the technology. So without going too deep, things that you need for a hospital to help prove that efficiency. One is data, what I call data visualization or clinical situational awareness. You need to be able to look at your analytics platform and with either a hover over or just looking at the iconography, understand what's occurring with your patient. And that's rare in today's tools, but all of the data is there to do it. And that makes a huge difference for physicians and nurses. It saves them minutes and minutes and minutes in the back room trying to understand by digging through the EHR what's going on with the patient. Something I mentioned earlier, clinical validation, having proven peer-reviewed studies that show the efficacy of your solution, the efficacy of your algorithm, and show that your compliance to the clinical therapies that are required for that are better. That's extremely important, because that's what will drive and improve care delivery from an automation perspective. So obviously that improves efficiency is part of that. And then the last thing, I think in the last 10 years with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, so many hospitals and health systems have deployed major EHRs, whether it's Epic or Cerner and they've just been embedded in these workflows, and it's difficult. In fact, if you talk to physicians, a lot of them will tell you it was more difficult when they didn't have the tool in terms of their practice. And so embedding into that your data visualization and your iconography into that workflow, so they can get that same understanding and that same picture of what's going on, that same situational clinical awareness of what's going on with their patient inside of the EHR without leaving the workflow is very, very important.
I can see that. Hey, let's go back real quick to that Class 2 certification. That's interesting. So FDA comes out with these guidelines. How difficult from a software development standpoint is it to get approved Class 2? I mean, is that a process that takes years or months or weeks or, and part of the reason why I'm asking the question, I'm wondering in my mind if this creates a slowdown of obviously the need to have that certification would perhaps slow down innovation or adoption potentially. I don't know, but maybe it's a
great question, right? I think it does both. I think it drives and slows down innovation. And I say that because the process to go through it depends on the level of expertise you have around regulatory requirements in your organization. I won't say it was easy for us, because it was not. It's a mountain, make no mistake, right? It's a travel. It's a big journey to get that approval. And some organizations can do it faster than others. The larger organizations, it seems to take 5, 6, 7 years and tens of millions of dollars, right? And as a smaller organization, we're more nimble. We're able to move the ship much easier. And for us, it was a couple of years to get through it. But it's an important thing. And I think that for us, at least, it drove a lot of innovation in our product, because the FDA said, not unless this is in place, or not unless this is in place. And it really opened up our eyes to a larger set of issues that we needed to consider than what our original platform had when we started that process. So the answer is both, really. I think it's a two-way street. It's, for some, it will slow down their innovation, and for others, it will drive innovation. But it'll definitely, waiting is the hardest part, right? That's a famous song, and that wait is painful as you try and wait for that device clearance, because really it doesn't allow you to market it, sell it, or utilize it unless you have that clearance. So while that process is going on, you're in neutral.
Yeah. Well,
worth the wait.
As a patient, I'm cool with it, right?
Yeah.
I want decision support software that has been through some rigor,
right?
Some FDA rigor, and so that totally makes sense. But then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God, it really. And thank you for answering. I think clearly I've got a good idea now. And yes, it would spark innovation. I mean, obviously you're of a type of company that can pivot a little bit. Oh yeah, we need to think about, we got to go over here and do this thing now. And what comes out at the end? A better product, at the end of the road for everybody who's involved. But that's really interesting. I was unaware of that, but that's good news again from being a patient side. Good news there. It'll be interesting to see how that now manifests itself. A little scary though, that what is it, 1% of software is being utilized?
I mean, that's based on being in hospitals and health systems.
Right, sure.
I mean, there's a very limited set of companies that have FDA Class 2 approved solutions specific to sepsis, right? There's decompensation, there's other things. So I know very few hospitals are using those solutions because they prefer to fall back on, we can build it in the EHR, but they can't. And it's been proven over decades. Unfortunately, it's decades of harm to patients by trying to manipulate an EHR into something that it's not. I think the other really good way to think about it is, if you're a physician, you wouldn't put a non-FDA approved pacemaker in a patient.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Put a patient up to a non-FDA approved ECMO unit in an ICU. You just wouldn't do it. So why would you have the diagnosis and the delivery of care run by a solution that does not have that same level of scrutiny?
And is it? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was like, to me, like the bottom line here too, also for, especially if you're trying to sell this kind of thing or talk to someone about it, is unlike retail, hospitality, supply chain, wherever else is you're trying to sell a solution, where at worst, picking the wrong one means you wasted some time and money. You're not as efficient or operable as you wanted to be. Maybe you got to pivot later on. Picking the wrong solution in this circumstance could cost lives, literal
I'm
lives.
laughing, but it's not funny.
I know.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, again, why would you not want to be as cautious as possible?
Yeah.
Pick the most proven solution as
I think
possible,
this
the
is
one
really
that has the
fascinating.
appropriate backing, because again, there are lives at stake here. And when we did this marketing campaign with you guys recently about sepsis and bundle compliance, and to your point earlier, like I was shocked when I started doing research about some of the acceptable numbers, that the whole 50 to 60% is passable bundle compliance. Like, no, I was taught in school that's an F. Like, I'm sorry, it's not passable. And things like 6% of all hospitalizations are due to sepsis. 40% of sepsis patients are rehospitalized within 90 days. Like, that's the kind of stats I look at and go, this stuff is terrifying. Like,
it is terrifying.
No one wants to have to do. I mean, it's bad enough when you have to go to the hospital for any reason whatsoever. Yeah. But to go to the hospital and then find yourself with something worse that either brings you back or keeps you there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, this is about saving lives. This is about keeping people, giving them the treatment and the care that they need, and then getting them on with their lives, and not compounding and on top of all of that. Again, why would you want any solution that didn't meet the top of the guidelines as possible?
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah.
Why would you're not going to cutting corners and saving a few pennies.
That's the scrutiny that the healthcare system lives under, right? Yeah. I mean, they're allowed. Maybe go ahead, Tim. You have a comment there?
And I would argue that that you're totally on target on that. And I don't think you're saving pennies, right? If you buy one of our competitors who's not a FDA Class 2 cleared solution, it's not any cheaper than what we cost. In fact, we're quite affordable, right? We just want to get the solution out there and save lives, like you mentioned. And we see it all the time. We see hospital systems. There's one in Georgia that we were in a competitive position with, and they chose a non-FDA approved solution. They went from 26th to 40th percentile in terms of treating their sepsis patients correctly, but that's still 6 out of 10 that is not, right? You're not really making that huge of a difference. And we've seen even worse. I mean, we see hospitals in the 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11%, right? So 7% means 93 out of 100 patients are not getting treated correctly. That's abysmal. That's horrible, and it's unacceptable. And with the technologies that are out in the US today, there's zero excuse for not being in the high 80s or low 90s, within 60 days of deploying a solution.
Let's go down a real quick sidetrack if I could, and I'd just love to hear your opinion of this. So decision support software is a broad category. As a patient that I will be at some point in my life, I'd assume, where do you see the industry going here? Is AI, going to start driving? When I think about decisions that are made in healthcare, is it going to become more reliant on the AI and the algorithms making decisions, or because I can imagine the old world, I guess, where the doctor or the practitioner is making the decisions. A decision needs to be made on whatever it might be, go no go on surgery, whatever it is. Tim, are we starting to see more and more of this become automated, through these processes? Is that where it's going to go? Or, and I'm just speaking really high level.
It absolutely is. In terms of AI, so there are AI or ML types of algorithms, right, that are learning models. Most of what we see on AI or ML is a model that was deployed where they let the algorithm learn, and then when they put it in the hospital, they put it in a black box and they lock it down and it no longer learns. And the problem is things change over time, and so its efficacy may not be as good as it was when you first started. And then there's other examples where they deploy the model. Just look at the University of Michigan study that came out about a year ago around an EHR. That model just didn't work, and the new data pointing to their new model for AI, it doesn't work either. I think the real question comes down to, is the algorithm indicative or is it predictive? And I don't know to what level you can predict you're going to get sepsis or you're going to get cancer. There is some certain levels where you can do that, especially around like HER2 breast cancer and DNA. But from a predicting perspective, I don't think that's the easiest thing to do in the world. Now, that being said, there is definitely a place for AI in this industry. So we can automate without AI using indicative algorithms, right? We have an indicative algorithm that takes your data and says, Dean or John, you guys have sepsis. And then we can drive that clinical process by having the best practices or the CMS guidelines or the Surviving Sepsis Campaigns guidelines codified into the solution, make sure that's delivered. And AI works really great. Like last week, I got a text from Wells Fargo that said, "Are you trying to transfer $27,000 out of your account?" And the answer was no.
No.
In fact, I think I said it differently, but it was no.
Insert expletive. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But AI is really good for those kind of things. Like, Tim lives in Minnesota and he was just at the Quick Trip gas station an hour ago. So I don't think he's in Toronto buying a, $1,000 stereo at Best Buy, right? Those kind of things AI is really, really good at. And there's a lot of application for that in healthcare, whether it's reading film or whether it's detecting labored breathing, but it doesn't apply as well as everybody thinks it will everywhere. We will see a lot more AI over the next 10 years. There is no question about it. Most of what we've done is more indicative. So we've got 1,330 algorithms across our larger platform that we've developed. So sepsis is just one of them. And that's where that whole malleable piece comes in. And they either detect or they drive clinical processes.
But ultimately, the doctor is still involved, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
here we're enabling them through data, dashboards that are interpreting the data. Hey, we've got an indication of a heart murmur or whatever it may be, right? That is then utilized by the practitioner to make a better outcome or better decision along the way, right? Is that
Right.
what you're saying?
We give them the data to say, hey, we think this patient has X. The physician or nurse has to confirm or deny X. Maybe it's actually Y, right? But at least we're pointing out the issue. And then the digital health really makes a major difference in driving that clinical process on the back end of that. The problem with clinical decision support as it's been applied in EHRs is it's a giant order set, right? So back to the sepsis example. You can order all 7 elements. The patient might not need all 7 elements. He might only need 4 right now, and then 2 in an hour, and then not need the last one, the perfusion assessment, right? Or might not need the vasopressors. But until the clinical conditions are right for that requirement, you don't want to just blindly order from an order set and say, give them all 7, right? Or give her all 7. So that clinical decision support really has a bad rap, because that's really what it was in the EHR to begin with. And that has completely changed. Now we're doing more digital health clinical decision support. So there's a definite major nuance there, a 20-degree turn, if you will.
So, John, I guess Star Trek was right.
Yeah.
Bones is still necessary. You still got to have the bones. You still got to have the doctor, but he's going to be, right.
I mean, I don't want a robot doing it all for me.
Well, that's where I was going.
I want
like,
that
are we going to have
bedside,
robots in 10 years making all these decisions? And,
well,
there's no such thing as doctors
Oddly enough,
anymore.
this reminds me of a conversation we had recently about, Major League umpires in baseball.
Right. Yes,
accepting and
exactly.
embracing technology to help them out with close calls and balls and strikes and stuff like that or whatever. While we may, as like pure fans, may be like, I don't know about that. The umpires, I'm sure they're probably like, hey, I don't like getting yelled at when I get the wrong call a couple times in a game or something,
Right.
So, to me, it's the same thing. Like, I would think doctors, like, again, there's a world of difference here.
Oh, yeah.
Because
World
a
of
doctor
difference.
makes the wrong decision, somebody could potentially die.
That's right.
They, too, I would hope, are thinking like, hey, I want to have as much on my side as possible to help me make the smartest and best decisions. Yes, at the end of the day, the actual human touch and human intuition is irreplaceable by even the most sophisticated of computers and technology. But having that kind of data backing you up so that you can make that decision and say, hey, I'm using my intelligence, intuition, and everything I've learned backed up by all this amazing amount of data and analytics that's on my side that proves that I've got this right.
But he just opened my mind to it's the carry forward also that's being implemented. Like, okay, well, here's the process to getting better, and it's automated in some way. Interesting stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely. Well, then let's get into Ambient yourselves. And, we've kind of touched on this a lot of what you guys do and how you approach all of this. So tell us a little bit more about your, approach to digital health, to analytics. More importantly, how do your solutions kind of fit in to the healthcare space and into hospitals with what they're already using, what they're already doing? You mentioned, these big EHRs earlier. Obviously, you got to be able to play nice with that kind of stuff.
Right.
So how does Ambient slot right in?
That's a great question. And I think probably the best thing to understand is like our legacy, right? So we're a Mayo spin out. We were actually created to help take creative solutions that are fostered in Mayo Rochester, and then where it makes sense, drive them into the market. And with our first product that we developed with Mayo was our larger aware patient surveillance platform. And that was done with a very close clinical partnership, right? So we didn't want to be the company that sits down in the basement in our Birkenstocks and shorts and tank tops and develop a solution that we think is going to be great for physicians and nurses. We actually developed this with physician and nurse testing and input and feedback. And that's really how we got to what is today our hardened solution. And I think the other thing to understand is as we're moving forward, we're taking that even further outside of Mayo. So we want to get a different type of teaching university health system feedback on that set of tools as we move into our second generation, which, we're midstream on development with. And we've got a relationship that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but with a major teaching institution that's going to help us in conjunction with Mayo take this platform to that next level from a analytics perspective. So that's really how we develop our solutions. And all of our solutions will continue to be developed under that clinical model, because I think it makes them clinically relevant, clinically effective. And then we know moving forward that it's something that there's a need for in the market. I think the other thing to think about when you think about Ambient is really clinical situational awareness. I mean, that is probably the most important thing you can have in your digital health toolbox. Because if it doesn't make you aware of what's going on with the patient from a clinical perspective, then it's just not effective. And doing that well is important. So if you think of a intensivist, right? They sit in a dark room, before they see the patient, and they go through the medical record. in one EHR, creatinine can be logged in seven different areas, right? So if they want to look for creatinine, they have to go look in these 7 different areas, right? So they spend 15, 20 minutes doing hundreds of clicks, pouring through the EHR to find the data that they need to then go sit down and work with their patient. We bring all of that data consolidated, and using iconography, a physician understands immediately what's going on, and with a hover over can get to that same level of data. With a click can get to that same data across all of the organ systems for a patient. So it really drives that clinical situational awareness. I think the second thing to understand about Ambient is, although our start was in the ICU, the intensive care unit, we've taken that application knowing that the pandemic, back to our first question, has caused so many things to change and created so many stressors on physicians and nurses. We're taking that tool and we've expanded that across the whole general acute care. So if you're in a hospital that uses Ambient and you're a hospitalist or you're a nurse, you can look at any patient in any bed without having to be right next to them, right? So we're helping alleviate that great mass resignation issue, if you will, as well as driving the efficiency. And then the last thing I think that's super exciting about Ambient is, if you think of, well, before I go there, as we go through this development process with this teaching university that I was referencing, we're going to be extending that into skilled nursing facilities and hospital at home. With all of the wearable devices that are out there today, we could easily monitor and understand what's happening with a patient. And so if I'm a physician at a skilled nursing facility and I want a consult from an emergency doctor or a hospitalist at the hospital or an intensivist, do they have sepsis? Do we move them, or are they just confused because they're old, right? That kind of help is available at the fingertips with this type of a solution. And then the hospital at home. And then the last thing I think that's important to understand is on the DART platform is, we named it DART for a reason. It's part of the larger Aware platform, but we also made it so we can pull it out, put it in as a low cost, low implementation barrier type of solution that's easy for hospitals to deploy, starting with some of the things that we have developed on the DART platform. We mentioned sepsis earlier. We've done that. We've commercialized that. We've built acute lung injury and ventilator-induced lung injury detection and workflows as well. And over time, you'll see us add myocardial infarction, stroke, all of the different types of things that can clinically occur to a patient in a hospital. Not all of them, but the major ones, so that we are notifying physicians and nurses, hey, this is potentially going to happen with that particular patient. So that's really important. And then I think the last piece to that DART platform is it allows hospitals to really drive towards compliance, not just for sepsis bundle elements, but for any bundle elements, any standardized treatment processes or protocols, that can easily be codified and then drive that process to make sure that the patient is receiving the correct care, no matter what clinical condition they're facing. So that's what we're doing in the marketplace today. A big part of that is sepsis. It's one of the largest problems in hospitals and health systems in the U.S., that's worldwide actually. And so that's really where we chose to start on that smaller piece of the platform. And then we've got a few other platforms that we market as well in Asia and Europe that don't really necessarily have applicability completely here in the U.S., but we certainly market them in Asia as well, in Europe.
Isn't it nice to have a vetted partner?
Yeah.
That you can bring into a conversation and has that robust of a platform.
No doubt. The thing that stood out to me the most is just this idea of like, hey, we actually worked with doctors and nurses and actual practitioners.
What? Yeah.
And gave them a solution and put together a solution based on their actual needs. Because I find this, and this happens in a lot of industries, but I find this in healthcare a lot too, where somebody says, all right, well, we've got this solution that does X, Y, Z. And we've done it over here in all these other industries. There's no reason why it couldn't work in healthcare too.
Yeah,
so
why
healthcare, let's market it there.
Swing.
No, they are different worlds. I hate to tell you that. And
for
if,
sure.
and if you haven't actually, processed and worked through the iterations and understood what the healthcare needs are, or your platform might be fit into it. So again, the bottom line is, we'll talk about this in a moment. Our value to the VAR here is picking partners that understand the healthcare space, not the ones that simply have a solution that could be used in healthcare.
Full air quotes. Yes. Right.
Exactly. All right. Well, hey, before we wrap up here with our value to the VAR, let's take a quick moment to thank our TEConnect sponsors. Yep. We appreciate all the fine folks that sponsor this podcast, our TEConnect program. We couldn't do it without
Honeywell,
you.
Intel, all those folks. Yes.
End of the year, we'll rattle them off. Then it's just too many to do on every single episode.
There you go.
You probably get sick of hearing us enough as it is. So, but hey, of course, as always, we want to hear from you though. We want to know what you think of the show. If you're watching on YouTube, like the episode, drop us a comment. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We're doing all kinds of fun stuff on our YouTube channel these days.
Yep, that's right.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to miss out when new episodes of our show come out. If you're listening on any kind of podcast of your choices, if there's any opportunity to rate and review there, Apple Podcasts in particular, it's where a lot of our listeners come from. Drop us a 5-star rating and review. Tell us what you think of the show. It's a great way to help kind of expand our audience. And we just like getting the feedback sometimes, Sometimes you do this day in and day out and you just want to know, am I doing good?
That's right.
Yes. And if someone leaves you a comment and says, you guys are great, there you go.
Otherwise, you're yelling into a void.
Yeah, I'm inspired for another couple months when just one person says, you guys are doing good.
Right.
Yeah, so please don't hesitate to do that. And of course, as always, reach out to us. First of all, if you want to tell us a topic you want to hear about on the show, let's say you were listening to this episode and you're like, hey, I want to go a little further into this one particular aspect of healthcare and analytics. I want a deeper dive. Can you guys get into that? Tell us. We will be happy to try to find someone to help us dig in. Maybe we bring Tim back on the show to talk about that a little deeper. But either way, we have to know what you're interested in. So there's always a link in our show notes, whether you're listening on a podcaster, whether you're watching on YouTube. Go to that link, drop us in a quick, hey, here's what I'd like to hear about. Here's my suggestion. Just for sending that into us, whether we use it or not, we will send you a TEConnect podcast t-shirt.
There you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Minimal work. Just a little bit of, I'd like for you guys to talk about
this.
X.
Yeah.
And we'll send you a t-shirt just for doing that. And if we end up using it, we'll call you out during the episode. We might reach out to you and ask for you to, hey, tell us what you want to, kind of questions we should be asking. Let's dive a little deeper here. So tell us what you want. This podcast is for you as much as it is for me and Dean to just sit around and ramble all day long.
That's right. Yeah.
Sure, we can do this constantly.
No, it's all about VAR education.
Yeah, we'd like to be doing it for a good reason because if we're telling you guys what you want to hear about. And finally, to keep in touch with us, you can always find us on Twitter. That's at TEConnectPod. You can also email us, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap things up here. First of all, with our value to the VAR. Another one of these topics where I feel like you should have got a lot of value out of this, but let's compress it. Let's package it up, put a nice little bow on it, put it under the Christmas tree.
There
Christmas
you go.
Is coming up.
So
healthcare, we know healthcare can be a fairly tough industry for resellers to tackle. There's a lot of different people out there trying to get a piece of the pie. A lot of money
solutions,
in healthcare. A lot of money out there. Exactly. Everyone wants a part of that.
That's right.
So, Tim, how do you think our VARs can position themselves to be the kind of trusted partners to tackle the big problems in healthcare and really truly offer solutions that are useful beyond just the standard, like, well, I got a barcode scanner and a printer I'm going to sell you. So how do they position themselves to be a little bit bigger and better than that?
I think the VARs have a great opportunity around, two things really. One is, I mentioned earlier, the part about being ingrained in that workflow, right? And so a lot of those devices that those VARs are selling are a communication platform, for example, right? So, the ability to integrate those communication platforms into digital health tools like ours that are also integrated into the workflow is a huge advantage. So if I'm a physician and I'm walking around with a Zebra or an Elo or a Honeywell device and it, tells me, hey, I have sepsis, right? With our solution on there, it really can help them, separate their platforms from some of the other platforms that are on the market, for sure. I think that's a tremendous value.
Love it. Yep. Absolutely. Partnerships. That's how you win in today's world, and building onto your tech stack and having the ability with a great vetted partner like Ambient to walk in there. It's a no-brainer. Yeah. You have to be in that flow. You have to have those conversations and understand how these technologies are interfacing with the devices that you're implementing. Right. If you don't, somebody else is, and you're going to be out of the game.
Yep, I agree.
So
the last thing I will add is this is from my experience on the marketing side of things. And marketing to healthcare can be a bit of a nightmare too.
Yes.
Just as much as selling into healthcare or even just getting your foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I said, we did this campaign recently with Ambient particularly about their sepsis platform. And they are one of maybe only 2 or 3 healthcare campaigns that I can think of over the last few years where there was a really strong reaction and lots of interest and
lots of leads,
a lot of the right people saying, yes, I want to read this content. Right. And I have been receptive to you guys reaching out to them after the fact too. And the tying factor to all those campaigns that have worked has been solutions that were above and beyond the standard stuff. So, yeah, sure, you might be able to partner up with somebody and go out with an inventory management solution for healthcare. Guess what? There are probably 1,000 other companies that are doing the same thing right now. Yep. And there's not enough differentiation to really help you stand out. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, and I'm not saying you might not win that business, but it's a lot harder to differentiate yourself when you're just going after something that everybody else is doing.
Yeah, that's right.
Barcodes, simple barcode scanning, to track, lab samples or whatever. Again, there is a need, of course, everybody's got to use it, but there are also a lot of solutions. When you partner up with someone like an Ambient, who is going out there and speaking to a much broader and deeper level of need in healthcare and in this whole analytics, data collection, the stuff that these organizations know they need to get better
absolutely.
at. They know they need to do more with, but they don't quite know how to approach it yet. That's the kind of partnerships that really move the needle and get you in the door and get someone actually to say, okay, I'll listen to what you have to talk about. Because I think if you're knocking on a door and saying, hey, I'm trying to sell you guys inventory management, like, we're good, we'll come to you when we need something. That's probably what's going to happen most of the time.
That's
when
right.
you knock on the door and say, hey, would you like to be a little better than 50 to 60% compliant in your sepsis?
How about getting
They're
into
probably going to
compliance?
hold
That's
that door
right.
open for a second and go,
What?
All right, tell me more,
exactly.
and potentially let you in. So that's my advice for you. These kind of partnerships matter.
That's right. Yeah.
Tim, what were you going to add there?
They do. I completely agree. I think the other piece to that is, if you talk to them about, what they're struggling with from a digital health perspective, it's probably they're supporting their hospitals that they partner with, right? From a ED, might be a small rural remote hospital that doesn't have intensivists or doesn't have the number of ED docs, so needs evening monitoring of the ED, those types of things. Or if they have a sepsis issue, we'll support you 100%. If they say, yes, we're interested, just let us know. We're more than happy to help drive that with you at that point in time.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yep.
As always, ask the questions.
That's
Find
right.
out what's really bugging them.
Yeah.
Because it's probably not
so
inventory
easy.
management. Yeah.
Ask the question, sit back and listen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, let's wrap things up as always with our favorite segment, What's TEConnecting
Yes,
with
sir.
You? This is where we get to talk about something from the world of science, tech, innovation, business, whatever it is, something that's got our eye, something we feel like talking about today. Tim, we'll let you start here. What's TEConnecting with you right now?
Well, maybe I should say what's not tech connecting with me, right? I just
We like
even
those
better.
too.
I just helped my son move from Minneapolis to Austin, Texas, and I spent 1,200 miles over the course of 2 days in a budget rental panel van that was 24 feet long, and it went 76 miles an hour. The suspension was horrible. It was a very unpleasant 2 days. Once we got down there, it was a blast, and it was a great time hanging out with my kids, but not a lot of technology advancements in the moving space over the past few years.
Yeah, man, I can buy into that entirely because I'm a guy who, when I'm in my car, I'm sorry, but I like the luxury at this point. I've reached my point where
I see.
I went through enough beaters and cars that I could barely make the radio work, and had to stick a screw. I had to stick a screwdriver to get the gear shift to move.
Yeah.
I'm all about the little bit of a lap of luxury when it comes to my vehicles.
That's
these days.
fair.
I like
That's
my
fair.
Apple CarPlay.
Yeah.
I like all the nice new
But
gadgets.
these box
the touch
vans
screen.
have not changed in 70 years.
Exactly.
It's the exact same experience you would have had in the 1950s taking your son down to
I'll tell you, if there's if someone wants to come out, or a U-Haul or somebody wants to upgrade and go for some much nicer, where
you think there's a marketplace out there?
I think there is. Like I would be willing to potentially, especially on a trip like you just had.
Yeah.
I would be willing to spend up a little bit to get some creature comforts that I'm used to in my own vehicle in a moving vehicle.
So you haul the Cadillac version. You'd be all over that. Yes.
Exactly.
I like
look,
it.
I mean, when you travel now and you get a rental car, most rental cars these days and rental companies are providing you with very modern cars.
Oh yeah.
We're not not asking you to go out and drive a Tesla necessarily.
No, but they're all
they're
like
most
recent.
of the time they're modernized vehicles that have
100%.
again a lot of the same comforts and innovation
yeah.
that you're used to in your vehicle.
That's right.
Why are we not doing the same?
No,
thing
not
with
in this rental. That would not be TEConnecting with me either,
I think
Tim.
the only thing that's changed is it has an FM radio now.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
So loud in that vehicle that you can't even hear it, right? You have to have the radio up so loud it hurts your ears.
Yeah, see,
Because
that's
it's a noisy truck.
Man.
yep, that would turn me right off. All right,
love
Dean,
it.
what's
I love
TEConnecting with you?
Well, I got two. I got one headline that's going to lead into the other one. But Meta acquires, Meta. Right.
Yeah, I'm
this
familiar
thing
with
that's going to rule the world
this
here.
potential
after the war.
nightmare company. Yeah.
Potential. So they acquired 3 virtual reality video game developers, right? They've revealed their new $1,500 Quest Pro VR headset. By the way, are you buying one of those? You're not dropping $1,500 yet on that?
I have yet to get into the VR thing.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I just haven't had the great experience to make me want to get into it.
So they're investing oodles of dollars, right? I mean, they're buying up developers, they're doing the hardware side, all this good stuff. Here's the second headline I'm going to throw at you. $1 billion metaverse only has 38 active daily users.
Wow.
What? So somebody ran a little bit of report. All this money is getting dumped in it. In fact, according to data aggregator DappRadar, the Ethereum-based world of Decentraland, which is one of these worlds that you can be in the metaverse, actually only had 38 active users over a period of 24 hours. So it's like they're dumping billions and billions into these things. Well, this one was a whopping 1.2 billion to make that universe that I just talked about. 38 people are using it daily. So what do you think, John? I mean, is like, what's going on here? There's just so much hype about Meta.
As long as I'm not asked to foot the bill at any point for this.
Yeah.
If the moment I'm told I'm, contributing to this online world that only a handful of people are actually utilizing. I don't know, man. We've talked about this before.
That's a pretty damning report. I'm like,
it really
that puts
is.
it into 38 people in 24 hours. I mean, and you spent 1.2 billion.
Yeah.
You got to have more people. I'm imagining that I'm missing out on this. Tim, do you feel like you're missing out on the meta? Maybe you're in the metaverse. Are you in the metaverse?
I am not in the metaverse.
Tim's not one of the 38.
Okay.
No. I'm not at all. I don't even play video games, to be honest with you. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to that.
Okay. Yeah, we're on the same page. But I feel like I'm being left out. But apparently, I'm not being left out.
There's only 38 users. My son is a big video gamer. He loves playing the video games. In fact, he just got the new Call of Duty, played one game, and then was permanently banned. They have this massive issue where they're permanently banning thousands and thousands of players, and it's driving all of the gamers crazy.
Wow. Why did he get banned? Can I ask if you...
He doesn't know. He has no idea. He played it like for an hour, went to hang out with a friend, came back, and apparently it's happening across the country to gamers all over the place, and nobody knows why they're getting banned.
Well, that's a good way to shut down your
no doubt.
your company. Just start banning people from it. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh man. Anyway,
okay.
I thought that was kind of interesting. So there you go. I don't feel so alone
We will
anymore.
not be in the metaverse anytime soon, apparently.
What's TEConnecting with you?
All right. Well, speaking of going places where there are very few people. So we've got all these people talking about taking people out into space, right? These low Earth orbit rides.
And
stuff
I've talked about how sports are now going to be in space.
Yes,
and that's the next way.
Everybody wants to get out into space and get consumers out into space, shelling out some money to get you out there and
only
check out space.
250,000.
Well, what about the other great unexplored frontier right here on Earth, which is the depths of our oceans?
Oh, this is fair.
Specifically, there is a company called OceanGate, and their founder has started to basically came up with a way to start shuttling passengers on trips to the Titanic in particular.
No.
Because even 20 odd years after that movie came out, we're still obsessed with the Titanic.
Still obsessed with it,
and want to get down there.
Dude, that thing is way down there.
Yeah,
isn't it like
it's about it's a 2-hour trip to get there, basically. Oh. So this guy, his name is Rush. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head.
An investor, an entrepreneur.
Stockton Rush is his name. So he's an entrepreneur that has always been interested and fascinated by this. And it took him some time to basically create a submersible that would be comfortable enough to take passengers, multiple passengers. Because most of those are tiny little things. I don't know if you ever watched like the James Cameron documentary that he did alongside.
Yes.
You know, when he was preparing to make the movie, you know, he actually went on a lot of excursions to Titanic to check it out. And, you know, and he made a documentary about it. Like, we're talking very small little submersibles with just a crew of maybe 2 to 3 people total to get down there. Well, he wants to make it more of like a tourist thing, where for the right price of $250,000.
Why is that the right price for everything? Okay, 250 grand, got it.
You can get a chance to go see up close. He calls these paying adventurers. They're called mission specialists, and they can pay up to $250,000 each for a chance to see the Titanic up close. Now, one of the selling points on this is that along the way, because you're going to
watch the Titanic movie. It's a 3-hour movie, so you get you there.
You watch half on the way, have a snack break, get to the Titanic, watch the other half. No, but basically, like, you can oceanic oceanic life on the way down too, because there's a lot of bioluminescent creatures as you get really deep down there. Right. I gotta say, that would fascinate me. I'd love to see some of that life up close.
I don't want to freak out that I'm in this little tube that any kind of crack, boom.
Yeah, gone. I don't know why, but for some reason, going deep into the ocean would terrify me more than going into space. Maybe it's because I can't swim, so I'm not.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's be honest. The same thing would happen to you if something happened and that thing broke. You're as dead as you would be in space.
Oh yeah, you're dead. So, you're dead within milliseconds or something like that. Yeah.
So this article I have about it, and always links in the show notes for this stuff. One young fella named Renato Rojas, who is a businessman and a banker, pointed out to, like, his reasoning for wanting to do this. He goes, "I'm not a millionaire. I've been saving money for a long, long time. I made a lot of sacrifices in my life to be able to get to Titanic. I don't have a car. I didn't get married yet. I don't have children. All of those decisions were because I wanted to go to Titanic."
Holy moly, that's a dedicated guy.
So he's all in.
Tim, are you all in? Tim, are you dropping $250K to go down and see the Titanic?
If my son said he was going to do that, I probably would give him a hard time. It just amazes me that someone wants to drop $250K on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a home.
That's a home.
Yeah.
And purposely made decisions not to get married, not to buy. I mean, what?
Like, I hope it pays. I hope it's worth it.
That's the story in the story, right?
It really
there.
is. Like, that's the guy. I was like, well, this story's interesting. And I read that, and I'm like, I want a documentary about this
guy. Yeah.
Like, did he watch? Because I'm sure he's young. I'm like, did he watch Titanic when he was a child or something? It's just like, that's it. My whole life is dedicated to getting down there and looking at this wrecked ship.
This is this is my mission in life.
Yeah,
this is gonna
exactly. I hope it was worth it for him. So.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got some ancestral connection to the
Titanic.
Maybe.
I'm going to go with that. That makes me feel better. No, I'm going to go with that.
If that's the case, then I can maybe start.
Right. Yeah. Grandma was on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Outside of that, no chance.
Fair enough.
No doubt. All right. Well, that's what's TEConnecting with us. It is unfortunately time for us to unplug. Tim Kuebelbeck from Ambient, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was great talking to you.
Until next time, find a way to blow $250,000 on some random obsession,
like a car or a house.
House.
Go house. It appreciates.
Yeah. There you go. Exactly. And as always, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect podcast is brought to you by ELO. All right, Dean, so when you have all this analytics and data and clinical decision software we've talked about today, it's probably pretty useful to have a nice device in the palm of your hand.
That would be helpful, yes.
Utilize it, access it, right?
Well, what good is that information if it's not communicating to somebody?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like if it's only going to like one computer in the corner of a dark room somewhere.
Yeah, that's not going to help.
With like a gatekeeper that only lets you in at certain times of the day.
We need mobility.
Yeah,
Are we going mobility?
We're talking mobility.
Oh,
ELO's got us covered here.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
So they're bringing their decades of touchscreen experience to the palm of your hand with the M50 handheld mobile
Love
computer.
that device, yeah.
It's an enterprise-grade Android device built for efficiency and connectivity. All right, let's talk some specs here.
Okay.
It's always our favorite part.
Yes.
5.5-inch HD touch display.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Integrated 2D barcode scanner.
Nice.
Android 10 OS.
Need it.
Rugged design for commercial use.
Love it.
You know, if you're dropping it all over the
yeah.
place or spilling stuff
You think
on
it's
it or
going to be
whatever.
dropped a couple of times? I think so.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do you drop your phone?
All the time. I just did.
Yeah. There you go. It's not a rugged device.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
The M50 is ready to seamlessly integrate via EloView or the MDM of your choice. All right, let's talk about what else you might want here.
Okay.
Long battery life.
Yep, need it.
Yep, check. It's got that. Quick charge.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I got that. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4G communications.
Oh, I got to communicate. I can connect.
Yeah, all the above. Got all that too. Plenty of accessories.
Oh, yes. There's that word accessories again.
There you go.
Modularity.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Elo, as always, has you covered.
There you go.
So the M50 is a bold choice for enterprises like warehousing, retail, healthcare, obviously, delivery, and more. To learn more, check out the link in the show notes or contact BlueStar's Elo team. TEConnect podcast is also brought to you by Zebra. All right, if you're looking for the right place rugged tablets
Yes.
that have it all right out of the box, I mean, you know, we're all pretty comfortable with gear at this point that you just open a box up and it's like ready to go.
Gotta work.
Yeah,
Right
exactly.
out of the box.
You don't. It doesn't want to be something that takes you weeks.
No.
You have to call in somebody to help you get everything installed. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just want it ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, Zebra's ET40 and ET45 are the enterprise tablets that give your customers everything they need. The perfect replacement to consumer-grade tablets, the ET40 and 45 are available in an easy-to-carry 8-inch model or a 10-inch model for easy viewing of information-rich apps.
Nice.
Again, I'm thinking healthcare here.
Oh, okay.
You know, lots of
yeah.
opportunity. Again,
Yep.
you got all this data. You have a nice, big, beautiful
dashboards,
tablet
information
to view it
to
on.
make these critical decisions. You got to see it.
There you go. With the ET40 and 45, customers get thin and light consumer styling that is business tough.
There it
Like
is.
sounded business tough.
Business tough, yes.
I feel like I have to say it in that voice.
Who's
Business
using
tough.
these other tablets at this point?
A shocking amount of people, probably.
Gosh darn it! Yeah, they need the Zebra.
That's one of those hospitals you just walk out of. You walk in and you see me using like an old iPad 2015 model.
Yeah,
and you
move
go,
on.
No,
Right, yep.
sorry.
Yeah.
You're like, I gave mine to my kid. I'm not using that.
Or
in the
give them
hospital
your
right
card
now.
and say, "I can show you some Zebra alternatives." There it is.
There you go. Exactly. Make sure they treat you first. I
Yeah, I guess. So.
All right, integrated enterprise class scanning, the fastest wireless connections,
Nice.
a multi-year life cycle, powerful new communications options, new solutions that add new capabilities, allowing users to turn these tablets into a POS, a workstation, two-way radio, and a PBX handset.
What?
That's a lot of cool stuff you can do with one tablet.
Holy
Yeah, no doubt.
moly! Yeah.
Plus, complimentary Zebra-only Mobility DNA professional tools improve every aspect of the device lifecycle. Customers can take work or productivity to the next level by upgrading to the Mobility DNA Enterprise Toolkit with additional value-add software tools. Man, these things sound pretty sweet.
Nice. Right out of the box.
But can you play Angry Birds on it? Sure. Are people still playing Angry Birds? I don't know.
You just dated yourself. Thank you so much.
I
Yes.
did.
Yes.
Learn more about the ET40 and 45 tablets and snag some useful selling tools by checking out the link in the show notes.